Good afternoon and good morning. This is Yusuf Ismail from the South African Debate Initiative. The South African Debate Initiative focuses on interactive debate and discussion on contemporaneous issues, political discussions, aspects on corruption, and certainly religious debate. And this is something that we encourage. Now, you are on for a special broadcast of Ramadan Bites every evening during the month of Ramadan, or every weekend for the 4 consecutive weeks of Ramadan. And today I've got a special guest with me, someone that I would consider a mentor, someone that is highly experienced in the field of dawah, and that's none other than Sheikh Rafeek Hassen. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you, Yusuf, and to your viewership.
Well, walaikum salam. And Sheikh Rafeek Hassen is a retired pharmacist. He has a Master of Arts in Religion and Culture, together with his dynamic team at the Islamic Interfaith Research Institute. They've dedicated themselves to promoting religious understanding and coexistence in a polarized and challenging world. He has, as I understand, attained a Master's of Art in Comparative Religion, and currently is doing his PhD. He's quite over 30 years, I believe now 40 years experience in the propagation of Islam. He's been instrumental in the training of about more than 50 international propagators of Islam. He's got a good media footprint. He regularly features on television, radio. I believe he's been on one of the stations known as Lotus FM for more than 30 years. And he's participated in many international seminars, conferences, and lectures. So you're most welcome, Sheikh Rafeek, and it's great to have you on our platform this evening.
Good to be with you again, Yusuf. Yeah.
Let me start off with this, Mr. Hassen, is that we hear this claim and this cliche all the time, and that's where I want to bring you in, dawah. And dawah has basically become a saturated market. It's been overused, it's been toxified, it's been used conveniently, it's been an excuse that's been put out there, it's been misused, it's been abused. What's going on in terms of the terrain from your initial involvement, more than I think probably 40 years or maybe even 50 years, to what we see now in terms of the oversaturation of the market, and everybody's using this terminology in a cliched, overused, oversaturated particular fashion?
Right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam khatam al-Nabiyyin wa ba'd. Now, before I get into the da'wah cliche, which it's true, Yusuf, I don't know if you're aware, the relief agency market has become a cliche. Everyone wants to get into relief and relief work and popping up different relief organizations because, there's so many and we feel there's so much duplication. And why is there need for so many other relief organizations when others are already doing the work? So in the da'wah, you are absolutely correct. This is what's happening. Now, on the other hand, there is a perception that unity means that everyone must be serving in one organization. So that's not true. That's not true. You can have many organizations, so long as they are doing different aspects of the da'wah. I'm talking about the da'wah. So, and one organization cannot do everything, no matter which field it be. You in the law field, there's such diversity, so many different divisions and subjects. You have specialists in the different areas. So likewise in da'wah. Da'wah is just a broad term, inviting, ud'u, right? You got inviting to ila sabilaka bi rabbikal hikmah, you see, invite to the way of your Lord. It's, by the way, it's everyone's duty. From a Quranic perspective, it's everyone's duty. So on the other hand, it's not just a collective duty, which is for organizations, but it's an individual. From an Islamic Quranic perspective, it's everyone's duty to the Prophet ﷺ, spread my word. Even if you know one word, one ayah, you spread my word. Yeah,
say the message even if it's my word. And so, but I want to start off with this, right? You are presently running the Islamic Interfaith Research Institute, but your role, and I think that of your uncle, if I'm not mistaken, Maulana Qasim Sema, and in fact your involvement with Sheikh Ahmed Deedat. I mean, it goes back a long, long time ago. You came from a student background. I know some of the interactions that you had with me just over the past week was that you were a student activist at one point in time. So I'm just curious to know that what was the phenomenon of the idea or the modus operandi and the operational frameworks of Dawah in the 70s, and I assume the early 80s when you were just coming out of campus, as opposed to what you see today?
Well, I think that's a good starting point for me, Yusuf. So, look, my Maulana Qasim Sema Rahimullah is my maternal uncle, my mother's brother. Now, he has been my first mentor, from my very, very early primary school days. You must know he was in the Newcastle Washbank area. He was already doing da'wah in the Msinga Reserve area. He was the imam at in Masjid in Washbank, and adjoining that is the Tugela Ferry area, which is and those days now we're talking we're talking in the 60s now. We're talking in the I can tell you from there because we were very close, and Maulana Sema, and he was more like a father than an uncle to me. Yeah. Even when he used to go to the Jamaat meetings in those days, I was still in a primary school. He had his own children, but he'll come to my mother. No, we in Newcastle, picture this, and the Durban officers here, the late Maulana Ansari and Umar Ji, they were the pioneers of the Jamaat al-Ulama of South Africa, it was called that, or Natal, sorry, it was the Jamaat al-Ulama of Natal. So he used to take me and go, that whole by car, and you can imagine, and we step over. So we had a lot of contact, quality time. He spent a lot of time. So he used to tell me how those were the days of British apartheid, British colonial period we're talking about, because African apartheid only took place, much later, was formalized, in 48 when Afrikaner took over. But he was working, and it was called native reserves. And he used to tell me vivid stories, Yusuf, of how he used to go into the Msinga Reserve. And many times he was arrested because coolies, Indians, are not allowed in a native reserve. And then, but he used to argue back, but how come the pastor goes there and the European priest is in there and he hasn't got his church in there? And I can't go, and people had to go and bail him out. So this is my memory of Dawah, how he used to defy them and still go into the township. Alhamdulillah, succeeded in reverting many. And that's why he was the one to finally realize we need a Zulu translation of the Quran, which he later on, when he opened the Darul Uloom in Newcastle, he had a principal, Mr. Masondo, who was not a Muslim, who used to sit with him hours and hours in his spare time, from English to Zulu to Arabic, and he did the first translation, which he printed in about 1980, roundabout. So he was active. Then when I left for university, Yusuf, in the 70s, 73, and all those years, he used to even prepare me, believe it or not. We used to have speech contests in Newcastle, and the MYM used to run some youth speech contests. They were also just coming up at that time. My uncle used to come home, sit with me, and prepare me for the speech contest. Give me the ayat of the Quran and that kind of thing. So he took a lot of care in my personal development. Then when I left for Durban, and we were Indian, so we were at an Indian school. Then now we're going to go to an Indian university. The University of Durban Westfield was only for Indians.
Did you go to Salisbury Island, or
no? I came just the year they moved. When they just moved to Durban, then he gave me an instruction: you must go once a week to Ahmed Deedat, and you're going to learn and spend time with him and start learning comparative religion. And that was his instruction to me. And Deedat was that time, Sheikh Deedat Rahimullah was in Madrasa Arcade. Him and Venka Marhum in one small room, and a small adjoining room. And believe it or not, Yusuf, that was an instruction. And then I have been in contact with Sheikh Deedat from that year.
So when was that? Was that the 1970s or the early 1980s?
I'm talking about 1973. And I invited
That was
Deedat.
just when he came back from As-Salam, I presume.
That, yeah, I mean, the dates could be 73, 74.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking. So, but around about there. And I used to, being on the student body, we had a very strong Muslim student body and a general student body at UDW. Very politically active and very strong. And the MYM had a hand in it. And we were the pioneers to form the MSA, the Muslim Students Association, later on, while we're still on campus. In 1975, we formed an MSA. So I used to bring Deedat onto the campus to give lectures as well. I'm talking about in the 70s now, from the 1975. So that's, and Maulana Sema and Sheikh Deedat were very close. And one day I remember I was in, I'm just giving you some big background in those periods now, in the 70s. I was involved, I qualified as a pharmacist. I had my pharmacy, but I was involved with Kwamasu Muslim Association in the 80s. We were responsible. I was on the committee. And although, again, it was Afrikaner apartheid, they did not like us going into the township. But that also was a time when IFP, ANC conflicts were flaring up in the townships. Very dangerous to enter the townships. We grew up in Steve Biko's time with BC movement at university. We are very politicized. I was an underground student activist.
Were you banned? Were you?
No, I wasn't banned. But I was
suspended.
I was detained many times by the security, and I was threatened not to carry on with student protests and all that. And I was finally expelled from the hostel.
I just want to stop you there. I want to ask: was there a kind of a parallel process running at the same time? Because, for example, you represented one body, which was the MSA, and of course your cross-pollination with Sheikh Deedat, and of course your relationship with Maulana Qasim Sema. At the same time, there was a parallel process with the MYM, which was kind of very influenced by the so-called Islamic movement of Maududi and Sayyid Qutb. And then at the other end of the spectrum, if you'd call it the more right end of the spectrum, you had the so-called ulama bodies, which could have been, the Jamiat al-Ulama of Transvaal and so on, and the MJC, that was kind of inherently conservative, but not anti-establishment in a manner of speaking. Whereas you come from the anti-establishment background, they were not anti-establishment. And neither were to a certain extent, maybe at a later stage, but in the earlier stages, the MYM or the formation of the MYM, they were also not anti-establishment, although they were influenced by the Islamic ideologues.
Yeah. Now, it's a very interesting question, Yusuf. My uncle was an activist. Do you know my other uncle, my Maulana Sema's younger brother, my mother's brother, was detained. He was with the passive resistance movement, detained and died in prison with the security branch under those years. So my uncle was very politicized, if you want to know something. And he used to tell me, he says, better you're going to do this work, but don't you'll get harassment from the authorities. But Nabi Sallallahu went through this, and this is part of it. So he groomed me, and he himself was detained so many times. So I come from a home, and from an environment where these things didn't deter us. So, and he was, so to say, I would put him, when I look back from the outside now, you were right that the Jamiat al-Ulama itself, the body was very conservative. You must know our elders, if you'll allow me to say something, my uncle was very revolutionary within the ulama circle, because when he now wanted to, when he was doing da'wah in the Msinga Reserve, I'm telling you things he told me personally on those journeys from Newcastle, 3-hour journey, we sleep over in Maritzburg. And so it's a lot of personal interactions. And he used to tell me that now he needed to put up a little Jamaat Khana in Msinga Reserve, right? And obviously he's poor. What does alims get paid even till today? Pittance. And he had his own children battling, financially very poor. And when he used to go, although he is a senior executive member of the Jamiat Ulema South Africa, but he personally was seen by them as an activist and rocking the boat. And he was told by the donors when he's going, why are you preaching to the blacks? You know, the regime is looking at us as Muslims and they respect us because we link to the Arab world. And now you're taking and bringing these Africans into this thing. And he, you know, he said, I had to put up with this. He was hitting a block
Where was the criticism coming from mainly?
from businessmen when he had to go to the
So
business.
Muslim businessmen were criticizing him that he was speaking to African brothers and
No,
sisters.
because he had to go for money. He had
Yeah.
to tell them, I need money now to I'm doing this dawah there, and I need to build a Jamaat. They say, what? Why why are you wasting your time with these people? You know, and so he says this was this thinking was there from that time, because you must understand the Afrikaner, especially in the Afrikaner, Hala Abraham Semense. If you speak Afrikaans, they didn't even just call us as Hala is Abraham Semense. These are the children of Abraham. You know, so he was trying to say they respect. That's why the Afrikaner allowed Muslims to build their masajis. They allowed us in school. Even I went under apartheid, my whole school career. Fridays, they allowed us to go to mosque because they said, no, Allah is Abraham Semense. The one thing the Afrikaner, he respected religion. The mistake Afrikaners made and Afrikaner philosophy is racism on a basis of color. That's the big mistake and separate development, which we didn't agree with. So you see, so yeah, the ulama circle, there was Maulana from Ladysmith. Let me get his name. My uncle and Maulana, I'll get his name just now, from Ladysmith. He's related to our Abed Karim. I think they were in the 60s. The ones who were doing what was not savory among the conservative ulama fraternity at that time, doing work, because he was doing work in the African townships around Ladysmith, and my uncle was doing it in Washbank and Newcastle. So you understand, and that's how he did the Quran. And he felt, and he says that is why he built Darul Uloom. He put up why did he end up putting up a Darul Uloom? There was already a Darul Uloom in Azadville. And you know what his point to me was? He says, look, why should we send because he was sent to India as well, to study. He says, why should we be going to India? India has no relevance to us anymore. We are in Africa. And he said, I want to open up an ulum, and I want to train local indigenous ulama, because this is Africa. They don't need to go and learn Urdu and see the Indian story. We need contemporary, local South African, and he trained the largest number of African and Malay, colored alims, and he got a big flack for that. They didn't want to support him. They say, what are you up to? And because they had their Azadville ulum, and he's not making Urdu compulsory. And he says, no, well, you're not seeing what I'm seeing. So he was way ahead of his time, Ismail. And I must know, he was my mentor. You can imagine what he was putting in my head. Only now when I wasn't aware of all this when he was telling me these things.
He was quite a revolutionary thinker in terms of his outlook, basically.
Oh yes, he was ahead of his time.
Contemporaneous for that time. So he passed. When did he pass away? It was.
I think he passed away in the 1990s.
I see, around 1990. But I want to take your journey forward, because it didn't stop with you. Your interaction. Just first, I'm just out of curiosity. How was because I've never met him on a one-on-one level, never interacted with him. How was your personal interaction with Sheikh Ahmed Deedat? I know that both Deedat and the late Marhum Ghulam Hussain Vanka, I mean, they were different personalities, but they complemented each other. So how was your interaction with the late Sheikh Deedat?
With Sheikh Ahmed Deedat?
Yes.
Very good. To the point that obviously, and because of Maulana Sema and Deedat's relationship, when I told him I'm Maulana Sema's nephew, he says, oh, so yes, better. I used to call him uncle. I used to call him Uncle Deedat. So he took again, not just, they say the reference makes the difference. And he used to take a personal interest. We were personal to the point that even when I qualified as a pharmacist, he used to stop at my pharmacy and get his medicines from me.
Mm.
And Sheikh did that. And he used to come into my dispensary and sit for 1 hour at a time.
So would he have informal teaching sessions with you? I mean, when you would go to his office, or how would the?
Yeah. Well, in between his work now, obviously, Deedat
Yes,
was
of
a
course,
one-man
of course.
show. So,
Yes.
so it was what do you call it? They call it in medicine in vivo and in vitro. So I'm here live, and somebody will come in, and a phone will ring, and so he'll give me things to read. So it's not like I couldn't take his undivided attention from him. But that every time I went into town, obviously when he's busy, he's got more people, then I'll just greet him, and he knows I will come again next week. And meet him. So it was that kind of, though Deedat only ran a very few causes. So he used to stop at my pharmacy. I'll give you one incident.
Yeah.
When he went and did he did a London tour, right? And those days there were no DVDs. It was the big cassettes. I don't know, VHS, what you call that. Right?
Yeah, it's VHS and Betamax. Yeah, I remember
Betamax.
that.
So I'll just give you one example. So he came back from one of those London trips, and he comes in there, and Deedat, on a person one-to-one basis, he was a colorful figure, right? And he was really a great personality. So he will tell me, he'll come there now, and I know when he's sort of upset now. He'll tell me, he say, see, better. I went to London, right? I don't know which place in London. Now he's telling me the story now. And I gave them, 12 topics, to speak on. And I pitch up there, and none of those 12 topics, they got another topic there for me to talk on. And already I'm upset because he had his set topics. Now the topic, I said, Uncle, what was the topic? So he says it was man-God relationship in Islam. Man-God relationship in Islam. So then he says, while I'm giving the talk, our Yusuf Islam, Cat Stevens, he says, Yusuf Islam was one of the organizers of that. He says, Yusuf Islam kept sending me a note, Mr. Deedat, you're off the topic. Mr. Deedat, you're off the topic. So he's huffing and puffing by me now. And he says, see, I brought this cassette for you. I want you to have a look at it, and you'll tell me what's your take on it. And then I said, okay, Uncle, I'll go with it. And I looked at it on that night when I closed the pharmacy. And I phoned him, and diplomatically, he was going a bit off the top, because you see, Deedat, Rahimullah, had set topics. You must understand. And they twisted the topic. When they said man-God, that in Christianity, it's a father and son relationship. And in Islam, it's a master and slave relationship. So he had to bring his knowledge of, the Trinity, is Jesus a son, and all that. But he felt, because he probably had set topics. So all I told him in a very diplomatic way, Uncle, you know what, you could have done by bringing some other aspects in which they were looking at. But next time you go, let me carry your bag for you and take me. That's what I.
So I want to bring that up, because something also happened to your life then at that stage, which, in a sense, catapulted you into the public limelight, and that was the release of. And I want to know the background, because I do believe I know the date, but it's the discussion or the release of the tape called From Hinduism to Islam, in which you were very much, I believe, part and parcel, or the organizer of the program, and certainly the moderator.
I chaired that session.
Yeah, you chaired that session. You chaired that, but very young Rafeek Hassen chaired that session. Yeah. And I believe that was 1985. Because I think in that tape, from what I recall from memory, he makes reference to a meeting and a debate that he was going to have with Professor Floyd Clark in July of that year. And the debate with Floyd Clark was in 1985 at the Royal Albert Hall. And he makes, so I think it may have been possibly February, March of 1985. What happened? What was the background? Where was it? Where did it happen? And I do understand it was a kind of a private setting. What tell us the background and history of what transpired.
All right. Now, remember when I was telling you about myself, that when I qualified, in 1978 as a pharmacist, opened up my own pharmacy in North Coast Road. And that's how did that, this is how, what they say, destiny has it, fate puts it that way, Allah's plan, that there was no N2, the outer circle N2 those days. So Deedat was living in Verulam, and his offices, is Queen Street in town. So Deedat had to pass my pharmacy to go to Verulam. That's the whole story here. So he had to pass me all the time. And that's how I used to stop over and what have you. So now here's the link with the Hinduism to Islam with Deedat and myself. And my uncle Maulana Sema gets involved in this Hinduism to Islam saga. I'll tell you how. So my relationship with my uncle, not with Deedat, I'll tell you, and it was both of them. And I tell you, I really admire these two giants, these two luminaries. Because, we came from a background, Yusuf. I grew up in the 50s. And, those years, children must be seen and not heard. That's how we were brought up. And we respected our elders. When I used to see my teacher after school, when my mother sent me to buy something, when I see him on the street, I'll duck behind a pillar. I'm doing nothing wrong. I'm so afraid I'll duck. I don't want him to see me. Because tomorrow he'll ask me what you were doing on the road. That's the respect we had and how we were brought up. But Deedat and my uncle Maulana Sema, you know what they did for me? Both of them, they told me better, both of, and now I know when you're mentoring somebody, it has to be, they said, when you talk to me, I'm not your uncle, remove the barriers. And you just be, ask me what you want. Don't pull any. That, they made me so relaxed. And they were sort of they brought themselves to my level, Yusuf. So that's a very important point I'm making, because that opened up the channels now for me to ask anything. So one day I went to home for Eid. I used to go home Newcastle for Eid, and obviously Maulana Sema was there with the family. And because of the relationship, I was then the chairman of Effingham Islamic Society that time. In 1983, I became the chairman in my area. And I was also the chairman of IDM. Ibrahim Dada, Dr. Dada went to do some sabbaticals or what, and they made me the chairman of IDM. So I was very involved in the Dawah. I was in the executive of Kwamashu Muslim Intuzuma Association. I was the secretary in that period. I was very involved in the Dawah. So I went home to my uncle, and then I said, with my interaction, Mamu, I used to call him Mamu. I said, Mamu, why your Molvis don't talk about comparative religion in the mosque, in the khutbahs? They're already telling us about the basics all the time, and about Hinduism. Our neighbors are Hindus, Mr. Maharaj, Mr. Singh, and we need to have information to interact with them. And you know what he tells me? He says, you go to Deedat when you go back, and tell Deedat to give you a lecture on Hinduism. He's an expert in Hinduism. He told me this. I say, is it? He said, well, he came to Newcastle in the 60s now, I don't know, early 70s or 60s, and gave us a talk with all those photos of Hanuman and Ganesh. And my uncle is telling me all this. He is a master in this thing. And that's what I did. So I went back to do that. I say, look, this is what my uncle said. He said, yeah, I set up a venue and I'll give you a lecture on Hinduism.
Because up till then, and even up subsequently, besides, there was a symposium or fallen symposium called The Concept of God in Hinduism and Islam, which Swami Agnivesh never went through. But it seems that of all the lectures and debates that he's ever done, Hinduism stands out like a sore thumb for in the community, and secondly, it's the only lecture that he's ever done on Hinduism for public consumption in the context of video recordings that exist about him. You don't have any other lectures dedicated to that subject.
So you're sharp, right? Because you also was associated with IPCI and what. Well, it was never for public consumption, Yusuf. So that's why this is intriguing. And
this was in a hall. Was this in a private residence hall?
It was held at our local library. We were influential in the area. I was the community pharmacist. We knew the people. So I said, look, it was a community. The library had a little hall attached to it.
Were there any Hindus present or just a Muslim audience?
So Deedat made it clear to me that, look, if you want to, because this was to know. The idea here was just to understand what is Hinduism. And he says, look, I'll give you a lecture, but obviously you don't let Hindus be there, because then I'll be, inhibited. And so just bring a few Muslims only. Because the idea was it's just going to be a lesson sort of about Hinduism. Then he phones me a day before, Yusuf. The day before the meeting, or the day, it was supposed to be in the evening, he phones me. He says to me, see, beta, don't bring ladies. Don't tell ladies not to come. because there are certain symbolisms in Hinduism that I will be filled in. I won't give you, you won't get the full story. Just get the main folk. Then I had to quickly reshuffle and phone and make some calls. And so they ended up in the hall. Then now we
But the ladies did come, I believe, because he makes references to, for example, in that lecture, and this is from recollection, a man and his wife sitting there. So I assume there were ladies that were present.
No,
were there no ladies?
There was no ladies, because I had to make sure there's no ladies there. He made a specific request. By the way, Yusuf was that time not with IPCI, his son. And Advocate Yusuf Bakas was with. So
was he present at the meeting?
So they came to do the videoing. So Yusuf did that, and Advocate Yusuf with the cameraman, right? So I'm sitting in the front with Deedat. You're just about to start the lecture, and I'm telling Deedat, you're saying don't bring ladies and don't bring Hindus, but you bring cameras here, man. So what's the story? So he tells me, no, better. This is for my personal archive. Right? We're just doing this. This is for our personal record. It's not for public consumption. So I was at ease. So that's the background to that. So now I get a shock, Yusuf. About 5-6 years later, I get a call from one of my friends. Hey, Rafeek, you're on the front page of the Sunday Tribune, man, pharmacist in Hindu Rao. I said, what are you telling me? He said, didn't you read the Sunday papers? I said, no, I didn't have time. I was so busy. We were in some Dawa outreach. He says, no, I went quickly and I see the whole saga about what Yusuf did now. Yusuf did that. That was the time when the IPCI was involved in a legal battle because Yusuf Ali, one of the trustees, wanted to get Yusuf Deedat out of the IPCI. So you know that legal jargon was carrying on.
I'm aware of the struggle there.
Yeah, so that was going on at that period.
So are you saying, just to clarify, so are you saying, because if I recall, and I was, I've read quite a lot about this from different, and I had archival collections of the old Muslim digest by Muhammad Makki. But I recall in his digest of 86 and 1987, that back at that stage, there was a discussion condemning him for the release of the Hinduism tape. Now, was it not released earlier than the period in which you say that it was officially circulated? Or were there isolated copies being sent out or being shown to the public audience? Or because I believe there was a screening at the University of Durban, Westville, by one of the the MSA, and then the Hindu student body took objection to the screening.
Yes, now that's exactly, you are right, Yusuf. So what's been happening now, so let me come into the picture. It's his son. Now, by then, Yusuf was brought into IPCI formally, right? And now Yusuf had a philosophy. Allah must give both of them Jannah and even Yusuf. But Yusuf, I don't know how well you knew him. And, Yusuf used to come and a lot by me like his father did.
Oh, we had a lot of run-ins. Him and I had a lot of not too positive engagement.
Well, mine was opposite. He respected me a lot because of his father's love for me. And even after his father passed on, he came and gave me a lot of Sheikh Deedat's books, valuable stuff. And he says, my father said, give this to Rafeek because he's the man who's doing the work and this and that. So, but Yusuf used to be very close to me. So, but Yusuf's one philosophy was controversy sells. And that was Yusuf's outlook to life. And he brought that philosophy when he came into IPCI. And that is where the whole problem was. There was a conflict between him and his father on this whole point. And therefore, Yusuf, whenever anything to make a controversy, he was too happy about it. And his father used to caution him, but there's certain things we can't do. And so you can see where I'm going with this now. And so he was the one pushing those videos prior to, so he knew it's a hot potato. But not with his father's blessings, though, because obviously he had access to all the archives there. So now take this particular one. Now let's come back to this tape that caused the public furor. So you are absolutely correct. This was in private circles. Yusuf himself was trying to promote. He was trying to stir up things. So you know where I'm going with this. Unknown to his father, not with his father's blessings at all. His father is traveling, going overseas. His father left him in charge. So you can see what's happening. So when finally this thing hit what actually caused this is that he put an ad in the paper Get your free copy of Hinduism to Islam, and for the public now. Yusuf did that. So I was taken aback. You can imagine now how upset I am. So I went straight, I left the pharmacy and I went straight for Deedat, because he made a promise to me. So I went straight to Deedat, and Advocate Yusuf Bakas was still there. I think it was in the next office or with him. So I went to Deedat, and I haven't seen Deedat so upset or apologetic, and so I told him, Uncle, he knew why I came. He knew exactly why I came. I said, Uncle, what happened? You gave me a promise. You gave me a word, this thing won't go public. He's looking down. He doesn't want to look at me and talk to me. And you can see the remorse in him. And he's telling me, speak to Yusuf. Not Yusuf, his son, Yusuf, the advocate. He's feeling he's uncomfortable because why? He doesn't want to see, because his son is implicated. So I go to Advocate Bakas. So Advocate Bakas and me got along very well. So Advocate told me the story. He says, you see, Rafeek, without telling us, he took this thing and this is what he did. He took it and put that ad in, and he caused the furor here. And it has nothing to do with the committee, his father or us, and we are in the problem now.
So as a result of that, from what I can gather, would it be correct then that I wouldn't say your relationship soured, but your kind of involvement with the IPCI became, and when I talk about IPCI, I'm talking about the IPCI of the original IPCI of Ahmed Deedat, kind of waned in subsequent years, and you weren't basically as active with them as you were in your initial younger days? Because I mean, I would assume that this would have had enormous repercussions for you as a pharmacist within your own community. I believe there were calls from the Hindu community to boycott your pharmacy.
Yeah, they wanted to burn my pharmacy down as well. So what I'm saying is, look, we had to we had to get together now to resolve the community. So some of the elders and the senior guys in the community, we had a meeting. Obviously, it's a hot potato, how to resolve this. So again, obviously, the general conservative ulama now are fuming. They say, we told you that this, and look at, he's doing it again, and all this is disturbing the peace. But the people who know these things, someone who knows the dynamics of dawah, we had a meeting, and what we came to conclude, now Deedat made a nice, I think I must give credit to Advocate Bakas here. Now obviously Deedat himself is in a soup because it's not of his doing. Ahmed Deedat I'm talking about. Yes. But now, you know what they say, damage control. Now you have to do damage control. And what Yusuf and with the meeting we resolved that, look, okay, the damage is done. But if you look at that video, this is how, and I was in that, obviously I'm in that meeting. We we need to come out as a united response, because what I was getting now, when in the week, I'm getting call from Yogin Devin, the reporter of the
Post.
And now, well, that time the Tribune, and they say, you are the chairman of the thing, or do you approve of what he did? What do you think of the tape? And Yogan told me where I got rubbed up the wrong way with Yogan Devin is because it's so hot. I told Yogan, look, we're still looking into the matter. Don't pressurize me, because I knew this meeting is coming up that night, and he phoned me in the day already for a comment. I said, I got no comment to make right now, Yogan. I'll phone me tomorrow, because I need, what we learned from this in the movement and in the Dawah. Doesn't matter what happened. We got to give a united response. I can't, you know what Yogan Devin actually wants me to do? He wants me to attack Deedat. That's what he's telling me. If you do not attack Deedat, I'm going to attack you. He told me no uncertain terms.
Yeah.
So I told him, Yogan Devin, and he told me straight, I'm going to get people to boycott you. So I told him, Yogan, you don't know who I am. I'm from the Steve Biko era. You don't threaten me with things like that. I'll tell you, you are welcome to put pamphlets in my whole area. 90% of my clients are Hindus, my customers, but they will still come to me because they know who Rafeek Hassen is. So I told him, don't threaten me. So I was already upset with Yogan Devin. The way he was trying to threaten me, in his phone call. So that night at the meeting, we took a decision. This is how we ended up. That, okay, we're not going to tell them what the mess Yusuf did. That we can't tell the story that Yusuf did this on his own, because then it's going to be another story. We always, a response that was given, Deedat agreed, and we came up, and I think it was proposed, if I recall, from Advocate Yusuf Bakers, tell them, all those Hindus who are upset, whoever is upset, IPCI is prepared to pay the ticket for any two of the most senior international Hinduism experts in the world. IPCI will hire the hall, the Durban City Hall, and Deedat will be alone. They will bring the two experts, and they will play that video from the beginning, from the minute by minute, second by second. And if there's anything that Deedat said wrong against Hinduism, he will make a public apology in that meeting. That is the response we came up with from there.
Yeah, I recall that, but that was viewed by them as a kind of a slap in the face, because I mean, it's Ramaraj and Ban Mahabir. I recall reading about some of these. I wasn't actually physically aware, because I was still in primary school in relation to it. But I mean, that's just one saga, which I would assume basically had an impact on your life in terms of your involvement with the community, and certainly changed your perception of society and your interaction with the community at large, I would believe.
Well, look, it affected my, every community has its left wing and right wing.
Yes.
So the right wing sectors, 90% of the doctors who were supporting me were Hindus. They actually, the Hindus, got the doctors together to watch that video to boycott me. They have brought all the doctors together to watch the thing. So I'll tell you how it ended up. And I was so confident, because my relationship, Yusuf, you must understand, I come from pre-apartheid era. I come from an era of British colonialism. I used to go and buy bread from Mr. Khumalo, who had a shop next to our house. We lived with blacks, we lived with coloreds, we lived with Indians. Mr. Singh and Mr. Maraj were my neighbors. Eid, they used to come into our house, and I lived very cosmopolitan. And so in my whole life, I grew up very cosmopolitan and not attacking anybody's religion, respecting, not accepting, but respecting every view and every religion. And this was, shaking even my inner standpoint on not attacking other religions. The Quran says so. Do not revile the gods of other religions.
Lest they are of ignorance, revile
you.
Allah. Yeah.
Yeah. So and so the good thing is that when a group came in, I'm just telling you how it impacted. So the doctors, they carried on supporting me. They knew that, because I only phoned the doctors and told them one thing. So here's my answer to you. I told them only one thing. Doctor, because they phoned to tell me this is what these guys are doing. I said, go watch it. I said, I'm just the chairman. Ask them in that whole tape, is there anything that Rafeek Hassen said about Hinduism that you don't like? Ask them that, because I was just the chairman. Why are you attacking the messenger? I was just the reporter, but the person who gave the report, I'm just the publisher, but the guy who gave the report, the debate, take it up with him. He's been telling you all to come to an open platform, and he'll apologize if he said anything wrong, and take him on. But I just introduced him and sat down. And when they went and saw that, they realized, no, Rafeek didn't say anything bad about Hinduism. And then when the mob came to me in my pharmacy, and I know the people from my area, and they were happy, and all I told them, the crowd, look, I came from student days of.
You say a mob came to your pharmacy?
Yeah, a whole group of Hindus from the area. They mobilized and came, very upset. Now, we were at varsity dealing with mobs, man. I was a student leader. I used to stand on the chair of the cafeteria and mobilize the people on a boycott.
Yeah.
Right. So we know how to handle crowds. So what I told them only one thing. I said, look, you people, you all know me. In all my years, you all know me to attack your religion. But leave me out. In this tape, what did I say? If you all watch this tape, tell me what I said about Hinduism you don't like. And then suddenly the murmurs started settling down. And the leader of that group, I can't remember who it was. You know what they turned around and told me? They say, Mr. Hassen, all I can tell you is I feel sorry for you right now because people are reacting emotionally and not rationally.
Yeah.
And they walked out. So that
kind of, I
was
think,
the
it wraps
saga.
up your saga, and it's quite an interesting thing that to have gone through and experienced, but certainly something that essentially molded you. I want to take you further to this aspect, something that has happened. I just want to know how it happened. When you look, for example, at movements like the MYM, and I mean certainly the Islamic Propagation Center and the Sheikh Deedat, we obviously know what catapulted him to the kind of global stage, particularly in the 80s, very late in life, by the way, only in this when he was 68, 69, 70, in that era. But what was it? How was it that these movements, for example, take it as an example, the MYM, were able to galvanize and draw funds from the Saudis? And for example, I mean, because it seems to me that there were different factions. There was one that was, for example, going to Libya. There was one that was going to the Saudis. Another that was attempting to source funds from Iran. With the revolution. Was this a kind of a cross-pollination at place whereby the funders and the donors themselves wanted to lay down their influence in the community, or was it a kind of an equal role play where anybody who basically sought funds for work that he believed was worthy could access the funds? Because it seems to me, and this is the criticism that comes out, Rafeek, is that particularly amongst our black community, was that there was a historical trajectory that the funding was monopolized by.
Are you talking about MYM or
MYM as
IPCR?
an example. Let's
Okay.
start off with MYM.
Now,
I
you
know
mean
I don't want to
IPCR,
focus
you
on
went to
that because
MYM.
I know
Okay.
what happened. But let's focus on MYM, because the allegations are that those same individuals, and I'm not talking about the 80s MYM, I'm talking about the early 70s MYM. A lot of the figures within the 70s, the criticism we get, at least now in 2023, among some of our black community brothers, was that these same individuals who were from the MYM, that somehow the other source funds that which eventually you had more kind of an evolution or a mutation of the creation of Sanzef and Senha and the Islamic Medical Association, that somehow the other this was a closed net circle, a closed net by a select few individuals that had the ability to source funding, and that was to the exclusion of the vast majority of South Africans who may have wanted to do and engage in work, but somehow the other were limited with resources.
All right, so you're taking me to another cap. I wore many caps in my life. Did you know that I'm a product of the MYM? So when I said you earlier on that at the university, remember I told you that my first mentor was Maulana Sema and my parents. But my second mentor Islamically was the MYM at university. They were bringing these international speakers onto the campus, and arranging these student meetings and student things. That was even before the formation of the MSA. But the MYM's philosophy was target the intellectual Muslim. That was the philosophy. Now, so I was at one stage the Amir of the KZN I was for many years the national executive. I'm talking about the 70s, 1973 or 74. Myself and many other students with Ibrahim Jadwat and many other MYM, Dr. Lachka, Dr. Ghulam Hussein, we were as-salam. We were building the roads to bring the first camp, to bring Yusuf Ismail, Cat Stevens for our youth camp. And we had Professor Fazlul Amran Ansari, Maulana Rahimullah. So as-salam was taken over by MYM at that time, but there were roads, there was no tar road. So, I mean, I'm talking about in those years. Now, how did it happen? Who were our mentors? It's the Islamic movement, as you rightfully said. Hisham Badran, Ahmad Sakr, Tutunji, Khurram Murad. These are all movements either between Jamaat Islamiyah or Ikhwan al-Muslimin. These were all who were based in London. Now, you know very well, I'm just going to not mention specific names. Where did this contact come from? It came from the Kalas, right? Who were the initial founders. There's a brother called Musa, or A.B. Muhammad, Advocate A.B. Muhammad. These people were already in contact from London and with all these Ikhwan brothers who were based in London, you understand, and in America. So, and they realized, and you got to give credit to them, that they just said, on campus, we're exposed to Marxism, Black conscious movement, and we could just have gone astray. We don't know which way. And they said, we got to have intellectuals to come onto campus and steer our Muslim intellectuals. And that's where my Islamic grounding of the intellectual side, or let me put it the way, my political shaping of Islam, because it had to fit in, because we are very political. We said, you got to fight apartheid. You cannot have all these things. But how does Islam fit in with this? And then, so they used to teach us from the Quran. The greatest impact is Professor Al-Sari had on me as well. When he spoke about social justice and Islam and all these things. So to answer your question, they were bringing people, all these Ikhwan brothers who ran away from their countries. Tutunji was from Iran. Badawi was from Egypt. They had to run because they wanted to kill them. They were on the hit list in their countries, the Ikhwan brothers. But because things have settled down, these Ikhwan brothers who were coming to train us, we had many camps. I attended every single Islamic training program camp. I was in the organizing body after that, in the MOM. So they knew what work we are doing. Leave alone IPCI on one side. By the way, it is the MYM that put IPCI on the map, if you want to know something. Do you know Deedat's first exposure to the international world was by
76? Who? Was 76, I believe.
But by who? It was on a conference that was
a youth conference, wasn't it? I believe it was a youth conference.
It was a WAMI conference.
Yeah.
It was a WAMI conference arranged by the MYM guys. Abu Bakr, Hafiz Abu Bakr and them arranged this thing, and they said, look, we're going to put that on the map. So it's because they were already dealing with them with training camps. You heard my point, what I said earlier on.
Yes.
So when that, but alhamdulillah, fortunately, some of these Ikhwan brothers who were our mentors, right? They became accepted. There was a change in policy in Saudi government, in the Egyptian and what have you. So there was a change in policy. So they made some truce, and so they started to accept them into their hierarchy, so to say. And that is how the Ikhwan brothers were accepted to in the dawah, to do dawah, and they had the tapping for the fund in the Middle East. And then they knew the work that WAMI is doing in Africa, not only in South Africa. And that is how the line was open. So it was at a time where you could count the African brothers. I'm talking about the 70s. You couldn't count which African brothers was an intelligent African of the intelligentsia or professional. Let me use the word. Yeah. Not because they're not capable, but because the dawah was only starting to take root. You with me? We ourselves were just crawling at that time. The seeds that was planted, it was Maulana Razak, by the way. The name of that Maulana in Ladysmith, Marhum Rahimullah, was Maulana Razak. It is Maulana Razak, Maulana Sema, and these people who were doing the planting the seeds that the MYM took over and formed the IDM and formed the different, and I took to the dawah component of it. You must understand, we had the youth component, the dawah, the tarbiyah component, the MSA component, the IMA component, the Amal component. The MYM gave birth to all these bodies, right? We went and branched off. Imbrok, we formed Imbrok. Finally, Impress. We saw the need for the media. The radio station before Al Ansar was called Azania. We created all these things because the Ikhwan brothers gave us the idea that to be an Islamic movement that is relevant in a country, you have to have all your tentacles of all aspects of human life. You got to be involved in. So the funding was there, but there was no African brothers of in that category. It only came in the 80s and 90s when we had people like Dr. Tahir Sitoto, all, graduating, what's his name, Sesanti, and people like that, who are now, we can see Dr. Khatija Malloy, and people, and then I must tell you, even in the MYM, we and the IPCI, we are bringing them in because they are the people of not on color, but on merit. We're coming in and given the position. But the lines of funding, naturally, they don't know. Those guys sitting there, the funders in Arabia, in the Arab countries, they don't know who's in South Africa.
So what were the regulatory frameworks back then in terms of making a determination, as to who gets what in the broader scheme of things? Because because essentially, the money could have gone anywhere.
All right. Now, As-Salam, that money also, the building of As-Salam came from Middle Eastern funding. So you must understand now, if you look at that period now, I must tell you very honestly that I was not involved in the funding side. So I'm not going to tell you, although I was in the office, when I was the Amir for that period in the MYM from 1983 to 1986, sure. It was in that period, the MYM was undergoing a transformation, you must understand. That is the time when within the MYM was a national body, and you had the Cape Town, we had MYM executives in Cape Town, Transvaal, and the Cape Town guys were pushing to change the constitution of the MYM from a youth movement focus, because that's what your constitution gives you your objectives, your modus operandi. We are there for youth tarbiyah. They were pushing us to say, no, we are in the middle of a revolution. We are in the middle of a struggle in this country. MYM must change to a political agenda. And we had heated arguments. Imam Rashid Umar, and there's another Maulana Musa, they were spearheading the campaign to change MYM from its objectives. It required a fundamental constitutional change. And we were from the old guard, so to say. And these were the young blood coming in. And we were telling them, look, we formed MSA, we formed IMA, we formed AML. Why don't you guys go and form one Muslim party kind of thing? But don't touch this mother body. For what the reason you are saying, Yusuf? Because we have a channel of funding. Everything needs funding. We have a channel of funding that's coming in under the radar. The government is not aware, and we're not using it for any political. There was no political agenda, so they turned a blind eye to it. And I said earlier on, the Afrikaner didn't mind we promoting our Islam after that slowly, but not politics. But now they want us to get in politics. What will mean? What will that mean? Immediately, it will mean we'll be under attack from the government, and
they would shut down the MYM. We
will shut down the MYM. And at the end of it, we are a well-constituted shura body, and nationally, regionally, and and we had to go to and the youngsters got their way. So they changed it to a political focus. The Al-Kalam was carrying youth articles. The Al-Kalam became political, and the very next month the Al-Kalam was banned, and the very next week the SBs are visiting our offices, and we met at that time. There was a transition in the broadest South Africa. We went and met the underground ANC in Lusaka, and I was one of those that went. When they were preparing Codesa 1 and 2, because now we were pro-ANC, pro-liberation, right? So we went and met the ANC underground in Lusaka, had meetings with Kenneth Kaunda, with all the ANC guys in exile, and so the MOM was now seen as a partner with the ANC in the liberation broad. And that now started to cut the funding. That's where the Arab funding, international funding started to be cut.
By that time, the old guard had already left. The guard of
that's what happened. The old guard said, we're getting off the train now. Y'all not listening to us. Y'all don't see the broader picture. And they went and formed a thing called the Islamic Forum. And I went my way because the dawah was too deep in me. And that's when I went and formed UDISA.
Well, was Libya ever a source of funding for the MYM?
No, never.
So because generally people talk about Gaddafi at some point funding Islamic movements throughout the world, and the Saudi element and the Iranian element, that never kind of,
No, not even from Iran, funding that, because there was enough money coming from Saudi. The Libyan movement, if you'll allow me to move on, when
Yes,
then later on, they told me to join, Deedat
yes,
told me and many others, go and join IPCI when Deedat got sick. And
yes.
then finally I joined the IPCI in, I think, 2004. I said, I'll go for 2 years. I left. That's when I turned my back completely on pharmacy, and I said, okay, I was at Sparkport Pharmacy at the time, my good friend.
You actually joined because I recall. Well, I mean, we had met before that, but our first interactions in 2002, as long as that, at the Assalam, where we had a program. I had given, I think, a lecture or a session, and you had just come in. I think you had just come after the Fuad Hendricks had just left. You
Yes.
had just come in as the incoming guy, and that's what I want to bring you to. That issue is that, well, I mean, not just focusing on IPCI, but in a general sense now, is that the criticism up to now, 2023, is that if you look at every single, and I'm talking about
Okay.
major bodies, major mosque trusts, and so on. The general element of critique is that there's nothing there which reflects the demographic of South Africa. It is primarily male dominated, and in specific with regards to race, Indian male dominated, and in some instances, some would argue even of a particular caste or clan.
Mhm.
And I mean, if you look at the criticism from where it comes from, and looking around and taking an observational perspective, I mean, that criticism cannot be faulted. That in 2023, we don't have a single, at least to note, organization, and I'm talking about, I'm sure there are many others. I mean, there have been many sporadic groups that have formed, but I mean, major organization with some trajectory over the past 50 years, at least 30 years, that has, for example, someone that is African, or an
All right.
African female, or a Muslim woman for that matter, that runs and is involved in the decision-making process. That seems to be non-existent.
Well, Yusuf, that is the failure in the Dawah. You are absolutely right about that, and we can't shy away from that. Now, I want you to know that there will be exceptions to what you say. The MYM, after that split in the 1985-86, when they took that political decision, the MYM, which was Indian dominated up to that point in time, although we had African brothers and Malay brothers. Malay brothers were Ottawa National Executive from Cape Town. But when they took that trajectory to go towards political, the MYM became very integrated in its hierarchy. So the MYM, we can't point a finger at them in terms of race.
Yeah,
Other
but the Indians left the scene at that time. The
no, but
Indians
some
are the
many
first
stayed
guard.
on.
They left the scene.
No, but many also stayed on. So it's not fair to say that
Yes.
Asif is still in the office from the day he was
Yes.
there. Yeah.
Sure.
And many donors have still stayed on and still supporting the MYM. So the old guard, the old guard left not because of race, but because of the political. They felt it was not wise enough to jeopardize a youth program, for politics. Because the ANC was going to win in any case. What difference will the MYM changing its focus do to the broader victory of liberation? It was there. We need to, it was bad. I still feel today it was a bad decision that they did to change, because now there's no youth programs in this country. If you look at all the activists, the real Muslim activists in Muslim organizations, they were a product of those MYM programs. And since it stopped from 1986, it's hard to count and find any youth leaders of today who were so grounded as we were with our tarbiyah programs that we received, which was holistic, political and otherwise. So let me tell you, you are right. The problem was coming from an apartheid background. I mean, the mentality is still stuck of Indian dominated organizations. So we can't shy away from that. But I want to tell you, so it's still there. I still fight this thing. I mean, let's not go to organization. I'm asking a question to you. Do you know, and I give this, I give Juma lectures every week. I'm on public platforms. And I'm asking, take Overport, Grace Street Mosque, take any big mosque in the country. Show me one masjid where the trustee is an African brother. Not organizations now, the trustee of a local masjid. The demographics of the masjids have changed, but the trust board is still Indian. So that has to change. So we are fighting that. Now, I want to give you some personal example. When I left there, I resigned from the IPCI.
Why did you resign? Was there a disconnect? Because I was involved. In fact, I came in. It so happened that one of the programs that you're going to be involved in, I kind of came in by chance. But I left the IPCI, and I haven't made this public up until now. Besides, so, but I left on bad terms with the organization, as many of us do. Did you leave the organization on bad terms?
I'll come to that, but I want to finish what I'm saying. I'll come and tell you why I left. But I'm talking about when I left IPCI. I was only supposed to be the 2 years, but I ended up 5 years. They didn't want me to leave because I got things moving again when I was there. There was no things moving. I started, you were with me on one of my public platforms. I took public outreaches. I started training. I trained, international Duat. I opened up a training center again at IPCI for comparative religion. I did all that. And with Deedat's blessing, he was still in bed. I used to go to him. He wanted me in minimum once a week to come to his bedside. So let me tell you what I did. When I left IPCI, I'll come and tell you why. What I formed an organization at that stage, called IFRI, this IFRI. But the prelude to that was Oodisa, Oodisa. Now, this organization that I'm calling Oodisa, you know who were I'm the first Dawah organization. We had 4 people on it, the founding members. Myself, Sheikh Ali Matonsi, Rahimullah, was passed on. Farooq Modisani, Rahimullah, was passed on. Isa Kumalo, Rahimullah, was passed on. I was the only Indian. It was the opposite. I created an organization where the blacks were dominating in this organization. I'm talking about fully fledged, registered with the master as an NPO. But I had 3 African brothers who were in the executive signing powers on the checks, on the checkbook. That's my track record. So I'm saying that we walk the talk, right? And those who know me, those who were my students, they know me. In Oodisa, I'll show you one of my, I'm not sure, if you want, I can show you a PowerPoint where our Oodisa, we had a logo, and it's OODISA, means Organizing and Orchestrating Dawah in Southern Africa. And one of the things we were orchestrating is we're setting up Dawah, local Dawah forums. And it was a compulsory, I've got all the documents. We went, myself and Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, I teamed up with Discover Islam. And we went to every major town and city of the 9 provinces and every SADC country. And we set up Dawah forums where it was compulsory to have African brothers with Indian brothers on the executive. We will not accept you as an Oodisa member, as an Oodisa executive, a local executive, if you didn't have an African brother with an Indian brother or colored brother on. We don't want an Indian only executive local. That was our requirement, stipulated. So I'll leave that for one side. And the reason why I had to leave IPCI, right? And I got everything. I got photos to prove. I've got documents to prove what I'm saying. And people, unfortunately, the 3 who passed on, but there are others who are still living today who know me, who worked with me at Oodisa. We called up a SADC conference, SAD conference in, I think, 2006, with Dr. Quick in Pretoria, the largest Southern African Dawah network conference based on the principle of breaking Indian majority rule. And we had people from Mozambique, Botswana, Lesotho, 9 provinces, you name it, right? So these efforts were done. The reason I left IPCI is that simply because, it was disorganized. That IPCI, I'm trying to do the Dawah with this approach. And the trustees who are not full-time on there, they mean well, right? But they are businessmen and professional men, and they come once a month from wherever their businesses and the million dollar operations. They come into the meeting and they say, do this and do this. And because I am Rafeek Hassen, who I am, I come from a background where I don't tolerate nonsense. I say things as it is. And I tell them, but that's nonsense. We cannot allow this to happen. You can't come here and tell us what. You're not on the ground here. I tell one guy, you see, I don't come in your surgery and tell you on which backside to give the injection to the patient, right? So you know your job. We know our job here. So it was not getting, and then that's the one issue. They were trying to get us to do things which doesn't make sense on the ground. And I'm not a boss who just listens to what they say, right? It has to make dawah sense for it to happen. It has to make strategic sense for it to happen. Number two, there was too much of interference from the trust board into the daily operations. And there was too much of rivalry within the trust board. So you'll find we make a decision. And by the way, we must give, we can't say this of IPCR. While I was the trust board, Dawood Ngwane, marhum, was the chairman of the Dawah portfolio. Khatija Malloy, I made sure Khatija Malloy comes onto that body. We had Taru Sitoto on that body. So it was not, I made sure I changed the demographics, right? But what happened, Yusuf, is when we make a decision at the board level and everyone is gone bad, you'll find one trustee comes in and something else gives the staff in the office. Mohammad Khan, Iqbal, Shabir, they are just staff. But they give them instruction to do something, and I see something else happening. And I say, well, hey, what's going on? They say, no, certain trustee fund. I say, but it's not on. I'm the director here. And this started now to be untenable to me.
So the bureaucracy basically and the kind of conflicting instructions either way.
You can't change the shura decision.
This is the problem. But
so
I mean,
I threw in the towel.
And you left.
And I left. I said, because of these reasons. There are 7 reasons. They wanted me to go fundraising. I said, sorry, I'm not a fundraiser. I'm a dawah man.
Yeah. But that is the issue, because that's what brings me, and we're going to wrap up soon, and I do understand time's at a premium, and your time certainly is also at a premium. The one thing that comes to me, and now is evident certainly, is that we've also been reading, and it's been widely notified in the press, on social media, is the issue of corruption, mismanagement, theft. I mean, in organizations like the MJC, there's been allegations, the Al Ansar Foundation allegations, ITV, we've seen what's happened to it, IPCI, which we've both been involved in, allegations of corruption. Are these organizations, the question I want to ask is that at a deeper level, is there a climate that is created which in fact lends to this element of all-out mismanagement and corruption and theft, and tied up to the aspect of, for example, people engage on perpetual fundraising activities for the sake of fundraising. In other words, programming also typeset and stereotyped to fulfill the dictates of a potential or possible donor, thereby leading to the trajectory of an organization going in this particular fashion, creating the toxicity, and at the same time then creating this environment where you see this form of mismanagement and corruption that you've probably been reading about taking place.
Now, you know why this is happening, Yusuf? The reason this is happening, and you are the lawyer and you the legal mind, you'll be able to advise me more on this. My understanding of forming NPOs, non-profit bodies, is that there mustn't be, between the trustees, collusion. There mustn't be, you can't have your brother or your sister being on the same body with you, or your wife, because that's going to lead to collusion. There has to be independent people where there's no conflicts of interest between them to serve that body. I don't know if you know what I'm getting at.
Yes. Right? Nepotism.
Now, many of these organizations, what's happening is that maybe they are not connected family-wise in terms of same surname or same clan, but they are connected in terms of they have an understanding that you scratch my back and I'm going to scratch your back. And people trust them. Now, the biggest danger I want to answer to you, it's happened. The reason why this is happening, and this is the reason why, one of the reasons I left, is although I was not involved in finance at IPCI, because you can't do everything.
What was there financial mismanagement during your time, from what you could recall?
Look, what I
suspected happening.
Well, what I used to pick up is I didn't like how certain things were done unchecked. And that was my big grouse. There was people left. Now, that's the point I'm making, and why it's happening in other organizations. People turning a blind eye to if they see something that's wrong. And I don't like that, and this is where that's what's happening across the board. that because no, they're just turning, even if a staff saw something, if another trustee saw something, they're turning, it's amana. When it comes to public funds, you cannot turn up. The Prophet ﷺ said, if my daughter Fatima steals, I'll cut off her hands myself. You cannot allow this to happen. And I couldn't tolerate, this kind of thing. And that's why it's happening, that Rawade, no, leave it, hey, you know what will happen. And then there's another thing comes into the equation. If we go now and do this, and if we charge him, then it will become a public matter and a bad name for Muslims and Islam, and let's hush it under the carpet. All kinds of reasons.
That's normally the response. The response is that and we've had these meetings, but the response is that it's gonna don't do your dirty linen in the public, and hush hush, you keep it quiet. And what that does is that basically obfuscates the internal theft at a lower level that is taking place, and then eventually it gives permissibility to corruption and theft at a manifest level.
Yes.
And when it becomes part and it envelops the entire organization, this is the problem that you've got.
It's not in keeping with Amr bin Maruf. Ta'muruna bil Maruf wa tanhun 'anil munkar. This is the fundamental principle of Islam. You encourage what's right, and you got to stop what's wrong. And it's a fundamental principle that overrides everything. Now, the point I'm making on the other flip side of the coin, I agree, being a person in organization, we must be careful not on social media to put, even if it's facts, we got to balance that. I believe that why it's happening, why people go to social media, because they're frustrated that the organization is not doing anything. Yes. And therefore, if the organization's cleaned its house the moment they saw it, there's no need for it to go further. But because it's allowing to fester, it goes into the social media. So that's the one issue. It must be solved immediately. Fire the guy on the spot, get rid of him internally, and it's done. Number two, don't put speculations in the social media. People are gullible. It's so many times people were wronged by wrong facts being put out there, by assumptions being put out there. And I think these are not good. And the Quran is, the ayat, Surah Hujurat, verify the information lest you harm somebody wrongfully. So we got to balance these things. But I agree with you, while we're rounding up, Yusuf, we still got to change the race issue in our Muslim organization, including the ulama body. Show me any ulama body where an African alim is the chairman, is the amir of the body.
It's never happened in South Africa. It's never happened at all.
So we have to change. We have to do that in our organization. I can be proud. I've got it documented. I've got photos. I've got that we had African brothers who were our leaders, as executive leaders. And we just got to keep pushing for that. It's going to be wrong on the other end to go and open up a black organization and put it blacks only. All you did is you reacted.
It's a reaction.
You didn't solve the problem. It's a reactionary.
One of the key things, and that's such a critical point that you're making, if, for example, the Ulama body or the United Ulama Council, not to make a symbolic stance, but were to, for example, appoint as part of the executive committee, not necessarily the leader, but even part of the executive committee, black ulama, black alims, that would make such an enormous impression in the South African diaspora and the context in which we're living in. The same thing with our masjids, the trustees, the trust board. None of the major masjids have black trustees. Yusuf, and then, of course, organizations, it just follows the same pattern.
Yusuf, I cry many times at night. I cry to myself many times at night. I have met them, Sheikh Ali Matonsi, Sheikh Isa Kumalo. Allah must give him the highest abode in them. We don't know what minds, what these people wear. For many a gem of pure serene, the dark unfathomed caves of Ocean Bay. For many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its sweetness in the desert air. These are these gems we have. We have African leaders who are capable of being the Amir of this country in South Africa right now. We have to start a mechanism on the ground, Yusuf. We have to start it from the ground. Forming a black organization and another counter organization.
That's a reaction.
It's reactionary. We have to start it on a right footing. You can't solve a wrong thing with another wrong procedure. You got to follow the process. In Islam, the end doesn't justify the means. The means has to be good and right as well. So I hope, inshallah, with this discussion, we
absolutely.
we cleared some of these points.
Just one last point, Sheikh Rafeek. We are living in troubled times in the South African context, especially in KZN. We've had so many disasters. We've had floods. We've had the riots. We are sitting on a knife edge politically in terms of what is happening. South Africans are in a depressed state economically, and certainly with COVID, it's amplified us at a infinitesimally high level. What would your and understanding your time's limited, what would your parting message be to the South African public, to the Muslim public, and to us spiritually in terms of how we can improve and certainly reshape what we see around us and in our communities?
Well, I'll answer that with Einstein's quote. Einstein hit the nail on the head. Einstein said, I'm not worried about these corrupt leaders, and I'm not worried about all the wrong and the evil guys out there. I'm worried about the good people that are sitting and doing nothing about it.
Well, those are certainly wise words, and I really appreciate that. We hope to have you again, Sheikh Rafeek.
Sorry.
And if you were listening, that was Sheikh Rafeek Hassen, who is the director and head of the Islamic Interfaith Research Institute. He's got a dynamic team there with him that is aiming to promote religious understanding and, of course, coexistence in this very polarized and challenging world. Well, if you've been listening to us, this was Ramadan Bites on the South African Debate Initiative. And join us next week for our final segment where we will be getting one last host. Till then, Assalamu alaikum, good evening, good afternoon, and wherever you are in the world, may the greetings of peace be upon you.
Alaikum salam.